Hello friends, this is the lesson number 27 in the series of criticism in English literature. In the previous lesson we started to discuss about Mathew Arnold as a critic, and I mentioned a few of the books on critical as a criticism, and then we discuss the main idea that he gives. He is praising ancient ones, and he says that the contemporary ones, even the moderns, they should look to get inspiration from the classic writers, from the ancient writers. And now in this lesson we shall discuss another concept of criticism, that why one should do criticism, or what is the importance of criticism. He is quoting here that to know the best, and that is known and thought in the world. To know the best, that is known and thought in the world. So simply he is saying that criticism is important, because if we want to know what is the best in the world, then we should do, or we should read criticism. And he further adds that we have several books, like example we can take that we have several books before our eyes, and we have to choose the best one, because we want to read some, at least one of them, and then we should choose the best one, and then criticism helps us to do so. So the main purpose or the importance of criticism lies in only one simple fact, that it should tell us what is the best across the geographical location, or you can say the country's border. So universally it should tell us what is the best. Through the criticism given by the other writers or the other critiques, we come to know that Shakespeare is the great writer, because it is not that we have read or we have gone through Shakespeare's all plays 38 or 39. We haven't gone through them, but what we have done, we have gone through the criticism made by the great figures, and only then we establish that Shakespeare is a great writer. So similarly he says that the main job of the criticism or the critique is to tell us what is the best in this world. And then he takes criticism as an art of judgment, because with criticism, like one is writing poetry, plays or prose or whatever, and then he is creating something that is creative work. But alongside this, Matthew Arnold considered that if someone is criticizing or making some critical producing some critical works, that is also equally creative and important. Because writing a play is very good, it is creative, but if you write something about that play, critiques, you are producing criticism of that play. What are the flaws of this play, or what are the good points, or what are the merits and demerits? All these things if you write, that is equally creative. It is no way less than any art. So he is establishing criticism as an art of judgment. And further he says that critiques are must in this world. Without critiques we cannot really find what is the best in the world, or if we do not go by the critiques, then there are number of writers and huge list of works. Can we go through all these works? No. So what we are supposed to do, we are supposed to go through the important ones. Like in the most of the university syllabus, you will find that the major works of Shakespeare are there, like Hamlet or Othello or King Lear, supposed to be there in the most of university. Why? Because most of the critics have established these works as the great work of art. So that is why, because it is not possible that we should read each and every work. Otherwise, if we go by this, then we tend to miss even the important works, because we do not know how to start. Even as in literature, you start to study literature, you do not know, if you just take these works randomly without any priority, without any recommendations, reviews, you won't be able to you won't be able to read the great writers, or you may just end up reading only the ordinary works. So it is very important that there should be criticism. Only then the people will get to know that what is the best, or what is of a good quality in the society is there or not. Then he also says that criticism helps us in establishing genius, because we know Shakespeare or even the other great writers like Homer or Virgil, these are great ones. Why? Only the criticism helps us to reach this conclusion, or this you can say that to this point that we consider these writers as the great one. Only the criticism. Reading each and every work is not possible for we people. Then finally he says that it should be done. The works of the criticism should be done, or if you want to analyze someone, you should do it objectively and with a purpose. And it is not an ordinary job. It is not that anybody can do. Doing criticism with, you can say, some critical points, not just ordinary passing any judgment. No, you have to do criticism with some you can say considering all aspects properly and factually, and then you pass a judgment. That is a criticism, and it has to be unbiased. This is criticism. And then he talks about how one can become a good critic, or what are the qualities. In the previous video I mentioned a title, that is In the Study of the Poetry by Mathew Arnold. And in this work he talks about the three estimates about a good critic. The first is the personal estimate, where one is preferring the things on the basis of his own likes and dislikes. You may like a particular genre of you can say work, like you may like the comedy, or you may like the gothic novels, or whatever. Means your own choices and preferences, your likes, dislikes. What Matthew Arnold says, that one should go beyond this. One should not consider only the personal estimate. Okay, personal estimate is there, but it should not be that only on the basis of personal estimate one is passing judgment. Then there is historic estimate. Historic estimate is something that from the historic context we find some great works, and we just think that these works are great ones, and we just try to go by this prejudice that the historic work like of Shakespeare and other famous writer are great ones, and the contemporary works are, they are not the great ones. Historic context is there, it is there to influence you, but you have to give equal importance to each and every work. It is not that simply with the historical impact that if some work are great in the history, like in historical works of any literary giant, when we consider their work, we tend to just ignore their flaws, and because we just see that Hamlet is a great work as admired by many, but we tend to just ignore the flaws or drawbacks of these works, because we do not really find it easy to challenge those historic or those great works. So that is why Matthew Arnold says that historic estimate is there to influence your judgment, but he says that we should go beyond this. So our judgment has to be on the basis of real estimate. Real estimate is something that where we have unbiased viewpoint. We do not, okay, we tend to feel for the personal estimate, and also what historic or what is the judgment of the great historic you can say other critiques in the past. But he says that what is your own judgment. I just try to simplify the things, like you just take one work, Hamlet of Shakespeare. You are now trying to read this. Okay, the content of the Hamlet is not that much, you can say, interesting. You may find you are quite fond of reading gothic novels or suspense, the novel with suspense or any sort of thing, but in Hamlet, that is the content is not of that choice. So your personal estimate is simply rejecting this novel. So Matthew Arnold says that do not go by this. Then we consider historic estimate. In historic estimate, we see that most of the prominent writers, critics, they have praised Hamlet. But if you just consider their praise in your mind, and you simply just go by this judgment that okay, Hamlet is a great work, so I should also praise this work, This is also not a good judgment. So 2 points I have discussed, personal and historic. And then the third one is the real estimate. Real estimate is that you should read this work thoroughly and you try to analyze whether this work is giving you pleasure or not. Because Matthew Arnold feels that the main purpose of any art is to give pleasure to the human mind. If this work is giving you any sort of pleasure, then you try to consider that, yeah, okay, how much do you agree with the content, or how much you rate this content, or what are the flaws or what are the drawbacks of this work, and what are the merits and demerits. Everything you can calculate, and on the basis of that you should try to you can say criticize or give a critical comment regarding this work. So Matthew Arnold feels that real estimate has to be there, and historic and personal estimate tend to influence your opinion, so it should be ignored. Then he says that there should be comparison between the works that you see, like in particular geographical location India, we find one particular work on corruption. Okay, one poetry is there, but you have to see the poems with the similar theme or content in the what is there all around the world, in the other countries, in America or in European countries, on corruption, the poetry. Then you compare them and then you pass your judgment whether this is the best one or the not. So one thing I have already mentioned, that in the beginning Matthew Arnold said that the main purpose of criticism is to tell us what is the best. Then he thinks about or tells us about the touchstone method. What is the touchstone method? So touchstone method, before getting into that, just remember one thing, that one should read the literature or criticize the literature with open mind and eyes, not go by the judgments of others or the biased opinion or anything. You just try to analyze the things truthfully, honestly. Touchstone method, it is also mentioned, it is mentioned in the study of the poetry, the same book in which the things are there about good criticism. And here Matthew Arnold says that we should analyze the poetry with touchstone method. Touchstone means something that the work that is of a great quality, and we have to compare now the other works to this qualitative work. Like you have something, you have read a great book, means you analyze that this is the best book, means by the style and the content and everything. Now you try to analyze, you try to compare the other works to that. Only then you can try to justify whether the work you are comparing with that great work is a good one or not. So first he says that this concept of touchstone is borrowed from the Longinus. Longinus talk about sublime, on the sublime, where he is thinking or he is talking about sublime means the greatest thing or the greatest work, means absolutely, means terrific work. And Joseph Addison we have from the 17th 18th century, and he's talking about this thing. He's quoting, actually he's saying that I would have a man read classical work. I would have a man read classical work which have stood the test of time. So by the time, the work which is testified or which have survived, that yes, this is a great work. And further he adds that also with those works, those modern works which get high praise among the contemporaries. And also he will recommend to the reader those works which are praised by his great contemporaries. So he simply saying that the work, a good work, should be tested across the generations, across the centuries. So great work like Hamlet, it is being tested by many critics of the 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th century. So most of the critics are praising this work. So that is why this work is worthy enough. So then similar to this, what Arnold says, that critique should compare poet's work to the passages. Critique should compare poets' work to the passages which are taken from the work of great masters of poetry. So he is saying that the great masters of poetry, who are these great masters? He has given some examples that you have a poetry in your hand and you want to see whether it is a good one or not. Then you have to take the passages from the poetry of the great masters. So the great masters, he takes the name like Homer, Dante, Shakespeare and Milton. So he says that you should take the poetry of these masters and try to compare any work with their poetry. Okay, maybe dissimilar in the content, but at least it will give you enough, you can comparison to make any decision that whether the work in your hand is a good enough or not. So only then you can make a, you can say, make a true judgment. When you compare any ordinary work to the great work, only then you find that where does it stand. So he simply says that the classical works, they set the high standard for any comparison. Like you have a classical work, Iliad and Homer. These are means so great work, means with so depth in their theme and content and structure. So these works are compared, oh sorry, any other work, whichever you want to analyze whether it is a good work or not. Iliad and Odyssey already established as a great work. So you should try to compare those works in your hand to these great works, their passages. Okay, content may be similar. Okay, content cannot be the same. It's not possible. But by analyzing, by feeling that yes, both works, means the work in your hand of any writer and the works of the great writer, both are giving you, means the ordinary work is giving you equally the great pleasure as the great work is giving you. Only then you can pass a judgment whether this work is of a great standard or not. And then he discussed especially from Homer's Iliad and Odyssey that one where a passage is there in Iliad where Helen, in Iliad there is a heroine Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world. He's talking that Helen's words are there. She is talking to her wounded brother. So there is one passage he has just mentioned. Okay, just a point to be noted. Then he also talks about Jews are addressing to the horses of Tellius. One character is there, Tellius, and Jews are addressing to these their horses. So this is simply a touchstone method. He is saying that take the great work in your, means for making comparison with any ordinary work in your hand, you are reading, you want to know whether it is a great one or not, you have to compare with the great works. Only then, that is the touchstone method. And for this touchstone he has mentioned the four names. The four names are Homer, Dante, Shakespeare and Milton. So one should compare the content of any ordinary work with the content of these works, with their style, with their diction, with their theme. Everything should be compared, and only then one should pass judgment whether this work is worthy enough or not. So that is about touchstone method, and I think it's already getting into the 20 minutes. So in the next video we shall try to analyze the practical criticism, the theory given by him, where he talks about several more writers. And the mainly important in this video to be remembered, I think, about the three estimates: personal estimate, historic estimate and real estimate. And the main purpose of the criticism is to tell us what is the best. And in the touchstone method he hails four writers: Homer, Dante, Shakespeare and Milton. And he is criticizing Chaucer somewhere, and we'll talk about Chaucer also in the next segment of practical criticism in the next video. So that's it for this lesson, and I hope you must have enjoyed this lesson. So thanks a lot for